blue, lustrous, almost acicular, but they're needles. They're really long, thin blades of Vivianite is what we're looking at. And in this particular locality, and there are examples of it, I can see from here, where it's actually kind of a naturally bent crystal. The last end of it, about half a centimeter, is bent over about 90 degrees for some strange reason. I haven't found anybody who's been able to explain that yet, but that in fact is the way they came out of the ground, and it's not damaged. You study the crystals and say, oh yeah, this is not a break. This really was that way. It's one of those head scratches. How did that happen? Sort of things. Some interesting. This is actually a cut stone of cassiterite, which is a tin ore. And but here's in this area, there was such quality that you had the clarity to be able to get a nice bright gemstone out of these kind of crystals. It's kind of a yellow-brown coloring of the material. I'm getting a lot of different colors. It flashes off the flashlight here. Yeah, it's showing in the green. Is it? The greens, I can see the greens and some red as well. So that's a neat piece. That gemstone was cut by Brett Cosner for us. He's a wonderful cutter, and he's been specializing in Bolivia material out of there for quite a long time. I think that's enough on this case, but there's some really interesting things in here as well. This is our Peruvian case. We have been fascinated by this area. Most people know, or many people, I should say, know Peru for its fabulous wire and rope silvers, of which we don't have any significant pieces. We had a few small ones that were over in the silver and gold case, but none of them truly cabinet size. But we have some wonderful Hubnerites. Here's an example of Hubnerite, bright red tungsten mineral that has a rhodochrosite on the side there, which is a sure sign that that's Pasto Bueno as the classic locality where you find rhodochrosite with Hubnerite. There's some other Hubnerites here, such as that piece there, and a few other small thumbnails. Here's a couple in front. This is actually Hubnerite from near that area, and what I think is the Muno Novo or something like that locality right nearby. Some interesting Peruvian barites here. This miniature and the same material in a much larger scale and back. This wonderful doubly terminated platelets or tabular barites that are just spectacular. Every crystal is transparent, and underneath this are some really interesting, unusual associated minerals as well. So it's fun to study that one. You have to obviously be really careful when you're handling it, because they will break quite easily. And there's absolutely no damage on the whole piece. It's absolutely pristine. This surprised me. I'd forgotten I had that. As we were putting this case together, I was scratching my head and said, well, what else do we have from Peru? So I scanned down through our catalog, and up popped this dioptase on what I think is calcite in this case, and it said from Peru, and I said, what? But that was in fact the case. This is a Peruvian dioptase, which I've not seen from anywhere else. It's on an unusual matrix. Let's see if what I say it's on. It says dioptase chrysocolla. It's a pink mineral that might be rhodochrosite, and some other things on a white calcite matrix is what I had identified in our just reading off the list for my catalog there. So without my catalog, I'd be lost half the time. So that helps. But some really interesting tetrahedrites here is what these are. There's a very large, another large example of it over here. There's also tetrahedrites, some interesting pyramidal crystal forms. Some wonderful folks are familiar with the recent Peruvian rhodonite blades. There's another one here over on this side. They're just spectacular crystals. That's just a gorgeous piece there. This is a really neat galena. It's kind of a blocky form, but it's some interesting terraced terminations. The surfaces are tiered, and it's like somebody put a bunch of building blocks together. I've had fun studying this. It's a 360 piece. I can't find a contact point on it. I've never heard of a floater of this material, but it's as close to a floater as I can think of, unless something was etched away. I don't know how that was formed. but that's a really fascinating piece as well. There's some perargirites in here, some other variety of silver minerals, and a couple of interesting pyrites, and oddly enough an orpiment here, which is unusual, and maybe very, I think rare, because I've never seen another one. This is an axonite from Peru that is actually fairly significant in size, and a very ancient old gratinite that came out of the Philadelphia Museum of Academy of Sciences recently. So there's a mix of really interesting things in here. A little bit of color, but a lot of blacks and grays in this one. I'll let Gail talk on this one. I promise to keep my mouth shut until she's done.
We wanted to put in some of our oddities, especially for the children, to see that minerals can also be fun and not always so scientific, and why not. This is a piece that we got early on that I fell in love with because it obviously looks like a Christmas tree. It's a malachite stalactite. It's got a soda straw up the middle, and it actually has a nail inside of it to put down into the base so that it won't wobble and fall over. But of course, being a big kid myself, I had to put in Rudolph and the little abominable snowman from the cartoon that we had when we were kids. And this is so funny because it's a calcite from Sweden, but a really good friend of ours and a very knowledgeable dealer said, "Why did you put that cheese in there?" Really believing that we had done like a Wilbur with the ham sandwich and put the cheese in there. And obviously it looks like a Gouda cheese, which is really cool. We got this copper in the back. It's a Michigan copper from a friend of ours, and I happen to have that little crab statuette, so I put them together like they're buddies trying to escape from the case back there. And this is a more recent piece that we put in. When we got this piece, which is andradite, and you opened your mouth, which is andradite, included by Heidelbergite, and it's got the little hematite as I call them, raisins on there, and it looked like a bread pudding to me. So I went online and I googled photographs of bread pudding, and I had like 150 to choose from. The internet is amazing, and I picked this picture which had the little cubes of bread with the raisins, so I thought that was really kind of fun.
This is a neat piece.
In fact, it makes me hungry.
It sits on a bed of long clusters of a dark green Heidelbergite crystals. So the underlayer, can't call it matrix, there's an underlayer of Heidelbergite crystals underneath the andradite as well that are really fascinating. This is a little case of something we a year or so ago, we stumbled across some pieces in an old stash of material that came to the market. In fact, the dealer is here in the Springfield show, and we found these very unusual. This is a rutile, the same golden needles as the big rutile stars that we looked at earlier. It's pseudomorphed after anatase, and the form is most unusual. You look at some of these. Here's the anatase examples. These are the anatase crystals here. They look like little jacks in the old game where you got 6 prongs, and you've got these really weird shapes. How in the world did that form? It doesn't look like any anatase I've ever seen, or anybody else for that matter, that appears to have been unique to this part of the world in the vicinity of the Doce Valley in southeastern Bolivia. I'm sorry, Brazil in this case. And there's at least 3 different forms, 3 different habits where you've got the kind of the jacks variety here. There's an elongated variety without so much the prongs here, and something in between the middle here. This one just fascinates me. It looks like a little top, as if you could spin it and expect it to stand on end. It's just a fascinating piece, and so we've been trying to acquire these as soon as we can find them. They were written up in What's New in Minerals in the MR in an issue in 1985. I found on this very find. And also we'll be coming up to some other rutiles from this area that were written up in the very next paragraph that hadn't been seen since the mid-1980s. It was a one-time find. Whatever was not sold at that time, we got put away and kind of rediscovered here 25 years later, which is pretty neat. So it's like new finds altogether, even though they're old material. We've got some Brazilianites and Bligonites here out of that same general area, and a couple of other odds and ends, including some interesting Gormanites here that, if you look closely, are kind of interesting sprays of a dark green mineral.